From Instagram to TikTok to X to Facebook, we really live in a moment in which social media platforms continue to explode. Now, while it's probably necessary for all organizations to have some type of social media presence, we want to make sure that we're choosing the right social media platform for the right purpose. So, in the last 25 years or so, there have been countless titles dedicated to exploring social media in particular contexts. So, here on the screen, Guerrilla Social Media Marketing talks about using social media for the purposes of sending commercial messages. Social media and public relations. What if your goal was to maintain strong and viable relationships with different audiences? Then this book provides some insight. Or the social employee, how human resources departments are overseeing and advising organizational members and their unique use of social media platforms. One of my all-time favorite titles in this literature is this particular title on the screen. Now, we'd have to be careful. The title is not bashing social media for the sake of bashing it. The title is suggesting that social media has become so popular that we have a number of gurus and we have a number of authors just churning out title after title with strategies that don't really work. They don't gain as much traction. Now, some of that is because of the algorithms responsible for sharing social media messages, but the bigger picture is that many times organizations fail to understand who they are and how they're being described offline first. So what is your core identity? What's your unique value proposition? How are you being discussed offline? And then the strong organizational communication manager will bring those conversations online and try to engage our certain audiences. So that's really the missing part, is that we're very quick to jump on the social media bandwagon, but we lose our why. Right? We lose our objective as to how we're going to use the social media. Another part of this conversation can look at how technology has influenced three different social modalities that could be considered into the advancement of communication technology. So that first modality is going to be the one-to-one model. And as you can see on the screen, this is concerning one medium transmitted to one individual. So very basically, our medium could be our voice. If we're meeting another person in person, we're using our voice as a medium to transmit a message. Now, to this day, that's still the richest form of communication exchange. If I'm offering an idea and you have a question about it, in real time, you can ask about a particular point that I tried to convey. Or we can work through some semantics or equivocal meanings, meaning that sometimes we're using language that's misinterpreted by the other party. If we're meeting face-to-face, we have a moment in which we can describe and articulate what we had meant. The moment that we start to mediate those conversations, right, a telephone, for example, sometimes I'm now losing track of the nonverbals that are happening to help inform the message. However, it's still a very rich form of communication. Some of the pros or the advantages of the one-to-one model, of course, is that it's a centralized, dialogic, and very nuanced space. But the cons or the disadvantages is that oftentimes these messages are fleeting. So once we leave that rhetorical situation in which we're meeting the other, we lose track of what may have been discussed, unless, of course, we were taking minutes. The next model of communication and the role that technology has played on it is the one-to-some. Now, with the advent of television, specifically cable television, we start seeing organizations within the cable space frame messages that reach a particular audience, whether that would be sports or whether that would be news or entertainment. And the same goes with radio, in that we have different channels with different formats that reach different audiences to hopefully compel those audiences to continue tuning in. So this is one medium transmitted to some individuals. Some of the advantages of the one-to-some include a mass-mediated multi-sensory messaging, meaning that I can use sound, I can use some managed communication tactics that really pull in my audience. Some of the disadvantages are that the more mediated the message becomes, the more depersonalized the message is. So we no longer have an opportunity to tailor our message to our particular unique one-to-one model. Now, where we are today, and thanks to Web 2.0 features where everyone can become a publisher of web content, we're now existing in the many-to-many model. And so communication becomes increasingly mediated and also multi-directional. So it invites a challenge for an organization to balance these three modalities if it's electing to use an interpersonal presence like a phone call or customer service, or if it's using a television or radio or even a podcasting model versus the many to many where we have multiple social media platforms engaging multiple audiences. That challenge is one that's not taken lightly by a number of organizations, and it ends up becoming a relatively chaotic space. There are some instances in which we've seen organizations say the conversation that we've invited is no longer viable. Let's say, for example, that we have scientific evidence as to why someone might need to take a vaccine to protect the public good, and yet the conversation in the social media channel becomes derailed with misinformation, in which case turning off the comments just seems to make sense. By the same token, we've heard great stories about organizations such as JetBlue, who has historically become very responsive to its X feed, formerly known as Twitter. But the great takeaway with our ever-expanding social media landscape is that navigating this environment requires strategic thinking. And so talking about why social media is BS is one of my favorite titles, is because it reminds us about understanding who we are not, who are our key audiences, what is our unique value proposition, and can we bring that external or offline conversation to our social media platforms. To help underscore that point, I have attached a short reading about Tupperware's journey into the social media space. Please take a few minutes and read that article. And then I've got these 3 response questions on our classroom website that I'd like you to answer thoughtfully once you finish the reading. Once you've uploaded your responses to these questions, you can move along to the next set of videos.